Hello, I'm Dr. Scott Wadier.
And I'm Tommy Welling, and you're listening to the Fasting for Life podcast.
This podcast is about using fasting as a tool to regain your health, achieve ultimate wellness, and live the life you truly deserve.
Each episode is a short conversation on a single topic with immediate actionable steps. We cover everything from fat loss and health and wellness to the science of lifestyle design.
We started Fasting for Life because of how fasting has transformed our lives, and we hope to share the tools that we have learned along the way. Hey everyone, just want to hop on real quick before we get into today's episode and let y'all know that the final Master Your Fasting Challenge of 2023 is coming up on December 13th through the 19th. That is right, perfectly placed in between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And we want to give you additional support and encouragement this time of year because no one likes to go off the rails for a couple of months and then come back in January going, man, I did it again. And where there is no guilting or shaming or wherever you are on your journey, we want to meet you where you're at and make this the best holiday season when it comes to your health and weight loss goals. So if you want to end 2023 with massive momentum and you want to start 2024 ahead of the game, then join us on December 13th through the 19th for our final holiday version of our Master Your Fasting Challenge. Head to the show notes, click the link, and we'll see you on the inside. Hey everyone, welcome to the Fasting for Life podcast. My name is Dr. Scott Wadier, and I'm here as always with my good friend and colleague, Tommy Welling. Good afternoon, sir.
Hey, Scott, how are you?
Doing fantastic, my friend. Excited for the challenge that starts tomorrow. Drum roll. Yes. That's terrible. I don't want to bang on my desk and make the microphone vibrate. Excited. Last minute Larry's. Last minute Lucy's. Speaking to you, speaking to me, come on in. The water's warm. Head to the show notes. Click the link. Last 7-day Master Your Fasting Challenge of the year, strategically positioned right in between Thanksgiving and Christmas before the new year. This is when we found that people need more support than ever. This is when I felt off the most in my weight loss journey pre-fasting.
Me too. Yes.
So come on in. Check it out. Head to the show notes. Click the link. Tommy, today's conversation, we want to head back to some of the big picture basics as we transition from 2023 to 2024. We did this last year as well. We launched our new Blueprint to Fasting to Fat Loss in January of last year, which has been really incredible. That's a free PDF. You can head to the show notes, click the link for that. We'll zoom it over to your inbox, your email inbox. But as we transition to the end of the year, this is when the pressure increases, the opportunity increases, the stigma around our health and our diet and our weight loss, all of that stuff in that dieting culture, weight loss culture comes to mind. When we have a fasting lifestyle, we want to think completely opposite of that construct, right? We want this to be an empowering, simplified version. You want to show up. Fasting for Life, aptly named, right? Gave you and I our lives back, improved our labs, reduced our weight, decreased for me, my undiagnosed prediabetes, asthma, allergy, COPD for you. We really want to go big picture here as we transition and set some intention for 2024. And this is, for us, the season to do it. This is when you plan, right? If you don't plan to fail, right? That's a cliche because it's true. So we're going to get into this big picture, defining health, and then looking at how to break free from the scale and really focus on some better fitness and activity benchmarks and how fasting fits into that and how some of the pitfalls with fasting can kind of go make it more difficult. And we'll talk about exercise, etc. But this is a really cool article written by Michael Hunter, MD, published in Being Well. And this was back in October. And it really just started a cool conversation between you and I. So we'll get into that in just a second. Just want to welcome in all the new listeners. If you are coming to the podcast now, perfect timing, right? We're going to set the stage, hit the ground running. You want to hear more about our story and how fasting transformed our lives and why we come to you each and every week with a fasting related episode or a lifestyle application of fasting. Head back, listen to episode 1. For all the OGs continuing to listen, you're on this journey with us. We're going to continue to show up. We got no plans on stopping. We only have plans of increasing to help people pull you out of the diet and weight loss mentality. I'm trying to get there and pull you out of the diabetes and obesity epidemic that we currently have here in the States and across the world, and empower you to know that you do have a choice and you can break free from that stubborn little piece of plastic, metal, or glass that's on the floor in your bathroom that literally just measures the gravitational force of the earth on your body. That's what it is. It's a number. But with that number comes a lot of emotion and feeling
Some
and
baggage,
whatnot. And that is
for
why
sure.
I love this conversation about breaking free from the scale, 3 better fitness and activity benchmarks. So Tommy, let's dive in.
Yeah, it's so easy to just say, okay, that's how I kind of define my goals. What's your biggest goal for the year for your health? Well, oftentimes it's a weight loss goal, and what we need to
should have pulled up some stats on that, because I'm sure that's what it is. Weight loss or financial goal. It's got to be. It's one of those two.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be like 7 out of 10 plus. I don't know. For New Year's resolutions, I don't know how many times I did it, but it's kind of the crazy train. When you're kind of defining your overall health by one single number, it's really not that simple. It's also not worth having the scale like define your day or your mindset or your quarter or your year, based on this one number. If it's an important goal, then great, let's go after it. But at the same time, let's have some other better indicators that we're kind of measuring ourselves by as well, and then work fasting into that. So, talking about
80%. Health and fitness goals, 70% financial goals, and then 60% personal development or career goals. So I mean, let's go. Keep going. I just had to look it up. Incredible. And that was from a Gallup poll from 2023.
Crazy. So, like your overall fitness, like, cardiovascular fitness to, strength, your ability to move your own body in a way that feels, unencumbered, and it feels like you are free to do so and to do the things that you want to do, is like an important starting point. Because when we hear the word fitness or we hear exercise or strength training, oftentimes we go to like pictures of the gym and very heavy weights and very rigorous exercises and things like that.
Lots of cardio, Biggest Loser type classes.
For sure. Expensive machinery and, needing access and memberships and canceling these memberships, maybe in February or March. Yeah, if they let you. So all of these things can actually be a deterrent or a detractor for going after. These things are very important. Fitness is very important, and it should be part of your definition of health. And, we talk a lot in the challenges about how to work in your fasting with your exercise and your fitness and defining fitness as well, because these are important levers to pull. But at the same time, a lot of times we have kind of a mixed up definition of some of these things just because of like diet culture and gym culture and things like that. We don't have to be at a gym to be fit or to be working on our fitness. And we don't have to be training for something in particular to have fitness as one of our overall pillars of health, right?
Right. And I think it's interesting that we set, 80% of Americans, myself included, would do the same thing. But with a fasting lifestyle, we really want to shift that mindset from the on-off to the lifestyle component, right? And that just takes repetition. And I really feel like this begins with the incorrect definition of health, right? So you mentioned this, and I want to start there, because when I started fasting, I was, and I know this is similar to you as well, it was like I woke up and I was the overweight, not massively overweight, but I had the visceral fat belly from my years of powerlifting, and I was doing the macros and calorie counting and tracking and keto and nutrition challenges and exercising 5 to 6 days a week and weighing and measuring and doing all of those things, right? But the reality is, when I came to fasting and, you shared with me what you had been doing, I was like, I did some intermittent fasting, but then I really started looking at fasting from a different perspective, where I was like, wait a minute, this is a simplifier. This is a life giver, right? And when I started fasting, I was doing it to get healthy again because my labs had started to look off and I was tired all the time. And I wasn't as great of a husband as I could be. And I wasn't as productive as work. And I was trying to sneak in naps so I could have energy during the witching hour to play with my kids.
Yep, me too.
So this definition of health is this thing that lives off in Peter Pan's Never Never Land in the future, right? It's like, well, I don't want to have Alzheimer's. I want to prevent disease, right? But in the now, you don't have an anchor to that, right? So fasting is a way to stack the deck in your favor to create long-term sustainable habits to get you results, because fasting can do that very quickly. And it comes to me back to this definition of health. Like, what is the definition of health? And I used to ask this when I would do these lectures, weekly lectures for years when I was in clinical practice. And I would say, okay, I would put the word health up on the board. I say, all right, what is the definition of health? And 9 times out of 10, people would say, I have no pain. My blood work looks good. Right? Those types of, I have no physical ailments, right? I'm able to live my life, right? And the reality is, when you look at the definition, it's the overall condition of an organism or a person at any given time. So it's Merriam-Webster of being sound in body, mind, or spirit, especially free from physical disease or pain.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's a general condition of the body, a condition in which someone or something is thriving or doing well, right? And if you look at the World Health Organization definition, health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity.
Yeah.
So
I like that because it has
number on the scale. Go ahead.
Yeah, it has an emphasis on not just no disease, right? I like that as kind of a second part of it.
Hold on. So guess what? No disease for me. I had a couple of labs that were off. I had these day-to-day symptoms, this fatigue, the extra visceral fat. I was doing the eat less, move more consistently for year after years after year after year after year.
Yeah.
Right? So I didn't have any disease yet, but I was absolutely a pre-diabetic when I got my fasting insulin tested, and it was 22.
Yeah. Disease was not defined in the right way that fit your individual circumstances at the time.
Correct.
Yeah. So, when you think about not having disease, but you have like these, physical well-being, right? And just going back to what I was talking about before, as far as going about your daily life in a way that, feels like I'm able to thrive, not just survive, but I'm able to thrive in my day-to-day activities, means that everyone's going to have a different level of, desired fitness. And you don't have to have a six pack or, a large muscles in order to be at a good fitness level. If that's one of your goals, then great. That can be worked into a fasting lifestyle as well. But if your goal is to do activities of daily living better or more easily, or to have higher levels of energy to play with your kids or your grandkids, or take a hike or do whatever it is, recreational stuff, that should be woven into your definition of your own personal health. And then reverse engineer will go through, okay, how do I actually integrate my fasting lifestyle with that and with those goals? I love a good goal. I just don't like to be aiming at the wrong target, like a single number on the scale as defining my overall, trajectory for health and wellness.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I love listening to Dr. Peter Attia.
Oh, he's great.
And the such and the like, I should say, when he talks about grip strength, being able to do a dead hang for 2 minutes, being able to do your body weight in farmer's carry, right? Not can I go run a mile, right? Not the president's fitness test that we did back in the day in school.
Sure. Or how much do you bench? Yeah.
Can you stretch and put your fingers past your toes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I love the concept of this conversation from Dr. Hunter, where he talks about 3 better fitness benchmarks. Because I worked in clinical healthcare for a while. And if you lose your health, or you get diagnosed, or you have a knee issue or a joint issue or something, or a disease process, then you spend your time, effort, energy, money, doctor's office visits, medicines, protocols, trying to get your health back. Right?
Yeah.
So this idea that we need to stay moving, right? So if you look at the centenarian population in Okinawa, most dense in the world, what do? They walk everywhere. They move, right? So movement is key. My grandmother, she stopped walking, she stopped driving in her 50s, and her health steadily declined.
Yeah.
She stopped moving. My dad, sick, suffering, insulin, diabetic, 15 medications, he stopped moving. He was sedentary. They're saying now being sedentary is worse than smoking in terms of your mortality risk. So he stopped moving, couldn't get the weight off. He was stuck. He was on all these meds. Now, when he comes to visit, I don't have a to-do list for him. When the grandma and grandpa come down, I don't have a to-do list big enough. I can't stop. I can't get him to sit down. He's out there taking the kids out of the cul-de-sac. He's running to the hardware store. He's climbing the ladder. He's in the attic. I'm like, this is what I'm talking about. And my mom's always done that, right? Can't keep up with her. But awesome. This movement, this fitness, this activity component, right, is where we really want to focus over when we go through these 3 different benchmarks that we're going to talk about.
Yeah. So when we're talking about actual just physical activity, I think it's important to remember, we've had a few conversations about trackers, different activity trackers, because that can be one thing. We see a lot of people with, Apple Watches and Fitbits and all of these kind of things. And we've talked about how they can be inaccurate and how 10,000 steps is not the holy grail, and, reviewed some of the research on that. I just like the fact that there is a reminder of, hey, you know what? Staying active, like you just talked about, is so important. I remember there was a book back in the day, it was called Spark. And it was about the connection between your movement, specifically, walking or running, your cardiovascular, just moving your body, and the health of your brain, your cognitive function, pushing off things like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and all of these kind of things that were just, huge. And the book was probably written 20 years ago. But just a gentle reminder that movement is important to you, and a number that you can quickly look at, whether it's on your phone or on a watch or on a different wearable like that. I think it's big, and it's not that it has to be that this one number defines you, just like the scale. It's not like it's a holy grail of a number.
Listen, weight's let's just say it. Weight's a problem because we know what comes with it. Carrying weight year after year, like I was doing, it's a problem. The United States, 75% of the population is overweight or obese, 40% in the category of obese, more obesity in kids than ever before. Right. So we're not saying that it doesn't matter, but it shouldn't be the sole focus and the attachment to your identity, right?
Of course, for sure. Neither should that Apple Watch, that number of steps that I took today.
Oh, don't even get me started. I have a Whoop now. Shout out Whoop. Come on, let's go. Get on board. But my wife, she would like when she first got it, I was like, oh, she's a data head. I'm like, oh my God, stop.
Yeah.
And I find myself doing that sometimes too. So it's a it's a tool, right?
Yeah. Or closing the rings. Like my wife will say that for her Apple Watch. Like, oh, I closed all my rings today.
No, get out.
I don't
I mean,
even
it's
really know
great.
what that
It's
means.
a reminder.
Yeah. Yeah. But just the fact that it's important to you and it's a visual reminder is like one of the problems in our modern, overwhelmed with technology kind of, a state of being, is the fact that it's easy to lose sight of what's important to us because we have so many different things going on. So a little bit of a reminder throughout the day kind of creates a little bit of self-accountability and keeps it front of mind. And that's huge for sure.
Right. And here's the thing is we think Biggest Loser, oh, I got to work out to be fit. I got to do these crazy long workouts. I got to go get 5 miles in, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's really physical activity versus vigorous exercise. Like we know that non-exercise activity thermogenesis, the NEAT category of caloric burn on a day-to-day basis, is from this category of activities of daily living, right? So we want to get out of this, body mass index weight scale thing. Not saying, again, it's not important. That was just a metric to be able to quantify data in populations, right? So when we talk about this fitness, we want to be looking at the measurements that we get from those wearables, right? So resting heart rate. We just had a question from one of our coaching clients. It was like, hey, what's the ideal resting heart rate? I'm like, lower, right?
Yeah.
So 40 to 50, lower. Right? 50 to 60 at night. There isn't a time when outside of an emergency situation, right? So you want to see your resting heart rate, lower because that shows that your heart is healthier when you're not doing any activity. And then Tommy, you used
your whole system.
Yeah, it's more efficient, right? And then the second thing is the heart rate variability, which is considered a sign of good cardiovascular health. And we've talked about a couple of fasting studies in regards to HRV.
Yeah, we have, because we know that as we are better and more consistent with fasting, that it's better for your resting heart rate and thus your heart rate variability as well to go from a 16-hour fast to an 18-hour fast to a 20-hour fast. And so it's cool to see that as we get better with our fast, and it's not that your next longest fast is the holy grail or that it needs to be ultra long, but understanding that, hey, I might not have any benefit at a 10 or a 12-hour fast, but I might have a benefit at a 16-hour fast, or increasing that a little bit to an 18 or a 20-hour fast. I might have an even better benefit on my overall health picture. And then the fact that if I'm using, let's say a wearable to remind me that movement is important, I can structure some of that movement around my fast and breaking my fast too. So that's going to support my overall insulin goals that lead to my overall health goals as well. So we can work these pieces together like pieces of a puzzle, and they serve as various reminders throughout the process that kind of help us stay focused on these things so that we can take a measurement like heart rate variability or resting heart rate and go, yeah, you know what? I don't care about, let's say, the 6-pack, and I don't want to demonize a 6-pack or anything, but it's such an easy visual
I ain't got one.
thing.
I still got a few pounds of visceral fat that's in the way, right?
Yeah, but it would be more important to
closer
actually
than I've been in
think
a
about.
long time.
Right. That's awesome. But, heart rate variability is something that I could measure. And then I could say, you know what, this is highly correlated to overall health and longevity and quality of life, lifespan and health span. So let me work on moving the needle there rather than just, hey, can I see the number on the scale move a little bit more? I mean, both would be better, but let's expand our thinking on what would be a good goal to shoot for here as well as we kind of transition into 2024.
So the couple of the fasting times you just mentioned, we have the research articles pulled up, and it was resting heart rate decreased by anywhere from 5 to 8 or 9 beats per minute in the different fasting groups, right?
Nice.
So, that's people are like, oh, well, 5, that's not statistically significant according to the research. I'm like, well, you know what? if you're a pre-diabetic on the A1C range and you get into the non-pre-diabetic range, and that's only 0.1 difference, that's a big difference.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
so
statistically significant
right.
for you. That's for sure.
It's significant to you, right? So that was one of the studies. And then there was another study for the heart rate variability component that showed reduced HRV. So you want to have a higher heart rate variability, showing cardio health, overall cardiometabolic health.
Yeah.
So a reduced HRV was associated with insulin resistance and lower insulin sensitivity. So we're talking about future blood sugar issues and metabolic problems, right? So this was in non-overweight individuals. I can tell you when my heart rate is lower and I see it, like that next day, I know that when I have a bad night of sleep, that my cravings are going to be higher, that my blood sugar maintenance and management is going to be less that day. I can feel it, right? So when we're talking about this fitness, fitness, yes, we want to get in. We'll talk about the fitness here in just a minute, but looking at these metrics, right, to track these in terms of long-term health sustainability or viability. And if you are going to be focusing on the things that move the needle with fasting that get this stuff to move, guess what? The weight's going to come off too.
Yeah. And like you just tied it back to where that sleep and that heart rate variability kind of predicted the fact that your cravings were going to be worse the next day. Well, that's where your overall health kind of came to meet with how easy or how intuitive your next fast is going to be too. And so it's cyclical in that way. And that's important to remember, because so often, like, I joined a gym or I got on with my diet, and which tended to mean that I was on with my exercise component as well. But as soon as I got off with one, the other one tended to follow, because I was linking them together, but I was aiming in the wrong direction. So if I can think about it, like, supporting my overall health means that I'm going to make my next fast a little bit easier to get into, a little less like I'm feeling like I'm restricting or I'm frustrated or white knuckling it. That's a really good thing. And we talk about that throughout the challenge as well, because that's one of the things, like, it can be easy to get off track. And then once I get off track, it can be tough to get back on. Right?
I totally forgot about this.
Continuing that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So day 5 is when we talk about this stuff. Day 6, excuse me, is when we talk about exercise. And it's a huge, like, fire starter, right? It's like,
sure,
the benefit of exercise is for cardiometabolic health, overall health. It's not the biggest needle mover for weight loss, because you're not burning enough calories, right? Doing your typical workouts. Now, building muscle increases your metabolic flexibility, your body's glucose ability to process energy, increases your insulin sensitivity. So absolutely. But we get stuck in the biggest loser type, no pain, no gain type workouts, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I love the perspective on this. Point 2 was check your fitness. So hit your physical activity targets. So I had mentioned a dead hang or a farmer carry.
Mm-hmm.
The doc here in the article mentions abdominal strength. How long can you hold the plank, right?
Yeah.
Arm strength, endurance. Because you mentioned this earlier, Tommy, and I love this because I use RPE, which is the rate of perceived exertion, in my Whoop when I track my Peloton zone training workouts.
Okay.
And it'll be like, some days I'm like, man, that was easy. That was like a 2. And other days I'm like, oh my goodness, that was a 25. And the scale only goes up to 15, right? But if I look at the trends on those journal entries, since I've been doing that training, they've come down. My RPE has gotten easier until I retest my zones, and then it gets harder again.
Sure.
Right?
That's like the calibration, right?
Right. And you're like, well, I don't have a Peloton. I don't have this fancy stuff. Great. So listen, can you walk up the stairs at your office consistently without getting out of breath?
Yeah.
Can you play with your kids without feeling like... The biggest thing we hear in the challenges, Tommy, is I can tie my shoes again without falling off the bed or feeling like I'm out of breath.
Yeah.
I can carry the groceries in more easily. I can pick up my kids. I can, those lifestyle type things. So you don't need RPE, rate of perceived exertion scales, right? But it's like, how does this check your fitness? Like, so hit the daily physical targets or weekly physical targets and use those as a metric. Because again, if those move, which also, when you're doing those long, harder type, more strenuous type workouts, that can cause more hunger, which can make fasting more difficult.
Yeah. True
so
story.
Strategically planning for that is also part of this equation.
Yeah, those are some great points. And, when you're making this real to you, to what you do every single day, that's where this really starts to become your own individualized definition for what is health to you. And the really cool thing that's not often talked about is when you define it for yourself and you make the variables important to you and the outcome measurements important to you, that's where motivation starts ramping up exponentially too, because you take a number on the scale, like, hey, I want to lose 20 pounds. it's arbitrary. Even if your doctor said you absolutely had to, it's still being like imparted by somebody else. And it's not based on a lot of things that are deeply rooted in an emotional response from you. So it can be hard to like muster up the motivation to like kick in things into high gear.
I'm the only person that said, I'm going to work out 5 days a week after work. And then, or I'm going to do it in the morning. And then the day gets away. And I was like, nah.
That's so tough.
I'm not going to worry about that little guy, right?
Tomorrow. So, I'll give it another go tomorrow for sure.
We want to shift our perspective here on the application of this fitness component. And we are not saying, exercise. Yes. Build lean muscle. Yes. Walk. Yes. For cardiovascular and decreased mortality risk. 100%. Sedentary living is part of the problem. It's tough when you're in pain and you're overweight. I'm speaking from experience because it's harder to want to do those things, which is why fasting.
It's hard to get moving.
Fasting can be so powerful because you can get that scale moving quickly and get some of the weight off and decrease the inflammation. And we've done, dozens of episodes on the non-weight loss related benefits of fasting. So the final thought today is really looking at, and breaking free from the scale and putting fasting and weight loss into perspective is really looking at the ADL component. And this is something that we had to track when I was in clinical practice because we needed to submit it for insurance claims. And never mind that, but re-exams and checkpoints of, hey, we're trying to not have you have knee surgery. So how are those staircases doing? And this falls into the category of what we call activities of daily living. We talked about this a little bit, but tracking your ADLs is a really great alternative to weighing yourself, right? So not just this flight of stairs, but, maybe it's the time you can do the loop around the green area for the walk. Maybe it's, can you do the dadding it so hard and try to bring all the groceries in one trip, but just make it apply to you. And these 3 things can really help shift the focus away from the scale. And what we want to do is shift it to, more importantly, sticking to your fasting timers, playing the long game, putting health as the priority. Yes, the weight's going to come off. Yes, fasting can make that happen more quickly too.
Yeah, and I think at a certain point of mobility, flexibility, all of these kind of things, activities
keep going. Flexibility. Something I'm working on.
Right? Activities of daily living might be a really important starting point, especially if you've been immobile or inflexible or, had a hard time getting around for a while. That's a great place to start. And then, working your way up through consistent, reminders and self-accountability. We talked about the wearables.
Right.
And just little things like that. Combine those with some consistency with your fasting and then watch some of the improvements. They tend to stack over time. And that's a really great process no matter where you're kind of starting from. So I think like taking your fasting and the way you define your health to the next level, like now in 2023, or if you're listening to this in 2024, it's the perfect time right now to do that and expand your thinking for it.
Yep. You just took my takeaway from today. I want to encourage you guys this time of year, put you first, keep voting for you, right? Yeah. If you need additional support, that's why we do these challenges this time of year. Hop in, head to the show notes, click the link, check it out. Let us know if you got questions. It's typically where people need the most support. And this is just from our experience and now taking, 5,500 people plus through the challenge experience. It's really like now is the time when the stress is higher, the sleep is less, the more food opportunities are there. Start putting some of these big rocks in place because then the smaller rocks and the sand can fill in when you start the year with some momentum. So
true.
Really want to just go big picture here, long-term health vision. It definitely relates to our journey, Tommy. So I just really hope that you guys can take a couple things away from this conversation, shift that focus, keep that momentum going. And we're going to encourage you to step outside of your comfort zone and hop on in for the final challenge of the year. So, Tommy, as we wrap up today, appreciate the conversation as always, sir. Thanksgiving is in the rearview mirror. Christmas is right around the corner. So happy holidays. Merry Christmas to all of you.
Yes.
We'll be back with episodes throughout the end of the year and then ramping out. We got some cool stuff coming up for 2024. So
definitely.
Thank you, sir. And we'll talk soon.
Thank you. Bye.
So you've heard today's episode and you may be wondering, where do I start? Head on over to thefastingforlife.com and sign up for our newsletter, where you'll receive fasting tips and strategies to maximize results and fit fasting into your day-to-day life.
While you're there, download your free Fast Start guide to get started today. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Fasting for Life.